Ready?
Yeah. Sorry, bro.
Oh, sorry. I will call this meeting of the Electoral Board to order. If you would all please rise for a moment of silence and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for being here. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. So do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Question, are we approving the October or the November, or both?
Good question. It would be both.
Okay,
We need two separate motions?
I don't know.
All right, in that case, I move to approve the October minutes.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
And then I move to approve the November minutes, which covers the post-election activities, the canvass, provisional meeting, and final certification.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Okay, the minutes have been approved. So we will proceed to reports from Electoral Board members. Heidi, do you have anything?
Good morning. I just wanted to make some comments to thank the staff. This is our last meeting for 2025 on the heels of a very successful election. And so I think a word of thanks to our staff in particular. The Office of Elections is an outward-facing public entity. The public relies on us to answer their questions, to walk them through the process if there's any questions, to make sure that things are done in accordance with the code and election law. And I think thanks are in order to our staff for being on call and ready to answer, especially in a timely fashion, whether it's the media, the candidates, the campaign staff, the party chairs. There's quite a few people that are paying very close attention to what we're doing, and I think the staff has done an admirable job of doing it well and answering all the questions. And so that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everybody's happy the election's over. But we live in Virginia, so we're already lined up on the next one. And I'm sure the registrar will cover it in greater detail later. Potentials for some unexpected special elections coming up in the year, maybe even sooner than we thought. But I echo Heidi's comments on thanking the Office of Election, the staff, the 804, I think, election officers that were initially assigned to the various precincts. I appreciate the authorized representatives, the volunteers, everybody that made the election what it was. It's all part of the same tapestry that we get to weave every election season. And I say election season, not election day, because it seems like it goes on for a very long time. I'm told that that a voter walked into a precinct and came up to the election officer and said, "I'm going to be honest up front. I haven't really been following any of the campaigns." And the election officer just smiled and said, "Well, don't worry. Judging by the turnout numbers, you're in good company." There are 329,000 registered voters in Prince William County. Only 166,000 of those showed up and participated in this election. So that's roughly 51%, which is better than it has been in previous years. I think the registrar is going to talk about that a little bit later in his report as well, but it's still it's pretty low. President Lincoln was well known for his statement that this government belongs to the people. It's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But in reality, it's really just the government of whoever shows up. And in this case, half of the county stayed home and let the other half of the county decide the contest. And as Keith has remarked several times in the other direction over the last year since I've been on board, I'm probably not as enthusiastic about the outcome as he is. But the people of Virginia have spoken. And the Electoral Board's mission remains the same regardless, and that is to ensure that our elections are safe and secure, fair and transparent. And I think we've done everything that we could do in our power in order to do that. And again, I commend the Registrar and the Office of Election for doing that. To those ends, though, I and Ms. Dina McBride, our election officer manager, we recently met with a group of bipartisan election officers, formed an advisory committee. We met with them on the 23rd of October to just assess their understanding of election officer selection and assignment, the process that we use, relevant code requirements, as well as their perception on how well we're doing with compliance within that code, and whether or not the process is both legally compliant as well as equitable. The officers stated largely that they were unaware of the countywide process, that for the most part they were focused just on their precinct, and even within their precincts they weren't really aware of party affiliation of the officers, which is how it should be. And they were also not aware of, on a broader county spectrum, whether or not we have parity and that sort of thing. Essentially, they're just focused on their precinct, so they weren't necessarily able to provide substantive feedback in that area. We looked at three particular categories with this advisory committee. One, compliance with the code in three areas, really two. One, officer parity. According to the code, which is it's a mandate, we have to have equal numbers from both major parties assigned. Second is the leadership requirement under the code, where the chief and assistant chief have to be from opposite parties. And then third, which is not a code mandate, but it is a goal that has been stated by the board, is to ensure that there are an equal number of chiefs from each of the parties. And so we were really looking at this advisory committee to get their perspective on, are we achieving these goals? Again, because they're very focused on their own precincts, they couldn't necessarily say. And so Ms. McBride had pulled a bunch of data that we could look at and then share with them. The intent was to see whether or not perceptions matched reality, but there really weren't any perceptions to compare to the data, other than the fact that almost unanimously the officers agreed that the process, as it's currently being run, is operating smoothly, and especially within their individual precincts. Reviewing the election data, though, more or less confirmed that. We do have some areas to improve, though. The findings from the data that we pulled for the November election, we are 93% compliant with officer parity, meaning equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats assigned. We were 7 precincts short of being 100% compliant. And as it turned out, there was a slightly higher number of Republicans assigned, total officers-wise, than Democrats. And so, I mean, that's, in one way, that's a good thing, because we've struggled to get a sufficient number of Republican officers. However, I'm still not happy, because I'm not here to try to give the Republicans an advantage or the Democrats an advantage. We're after compliance with the code, equal on both sides. The second area, which is the leadership mandate under the code, where the chief and assistant chief have to be from different parties, we were 100% compliant with that code requirement. And then lastly, again, not a code mandate, but something that we have striven for as a board, is an equal number of chiefs from both of the major parties, and we fell short of that by 16 precincts, roughly a 58%, 42% split in that area. But moving in the right direction. The next meeting that we have with this advisory committee will then focus on potential policy changes that will get us closer to 100% compliance in both of the mandated areas, as well as successful accomplishment of the board's stated goal. As far as support and actions towards strategic goals, since my appointment to the Electoral Board, I've tried to focus on strengthening 3 key aspects of our elections: oversight, accountability, and transparency. In the area of oversight, as you've heard me say in this room before, the Electoral Board is responsible for oversight of the General Registrar and the election process in the county. Much of that oversight, however, involves actions that are undertaken in the Virginia Election and Registration Information System, VERIS, which at the moment, board members have no access and no visibility without assistance from the Office of Elections. So I submitted a letter to elect dated 14 April of this year requesting read-only access to VERIS for board members in order to enable meaningful oversight. No response from elect, and to me personally, not even an acknowledgement that they received the letter, but I know that they did, but they have not responded, which is very disappointing. In the area of accountability, during the 2024 election cycle, the Office of Elections referred 3 matters to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for potential prosecution. There was one instance where an absentee ballot was attempted on behalf of a deceased individual. There was another instance where a voter appeared to have attempted to vote twice. And then there was an instance of an individual who allegedly provided improper assistance to a disabled voter. We referred those matters to the Commonwealth Attorney. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office declined prosecution in all 3 of those cases. I sent a follow-up letter on the 13th of November requesting clarification regarding the criteria that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office uses to determine which election-related cases are pursued. To their credit, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office did respond promptly the very next day in a letter dated 14 November, stating that after evaluating the circumstances in each of these 3 cases, including the factors that they considered include the age of the individual involved, as well as the likelihood of being able to prove the allegations. And due to those considerations, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office determined no further action would be taken. It is noteworthy, I think, to state that in all 3 of these instances, the election safeguards that are in place worked as they should have. No improper ballot was cast. The attempted actions, whether they were fraudulent or inadvertent and innocent, were prevented from affecting the outcome. So that's the good news. On the third area of transparency, elections, as everybody is aware, have become increasingly contentious in recent years, with both major parties either expressing concern with the process or being upset with the other side for one reason or another, particularly regarding the processes that occur either inside of a machine or outside of the public view. And those who are not particularly concerned about transparency are often very annoyed with the people who are. And neither of them actually have ready access to the information that would prove or disprove their point. A lack of accessible information contributes to mistrust and often results, for our office, in freedom of information requests that then soak up a lot of time and bandwidth for the staff. So, to address these concerns, which I believe would be to the benefit of both parties, it's important to do all that we can to shift public perception of elections from a black box to a glass box. And the Office of Elections and our registrar, they've done a lot of things toward that end. We post results tapes online. We hosted multiple open houses. Both of those actions have actually been recognized beyond the county, within the state, and beyond. We've actually received some recognition and awards for those initiatives, so that's a good thing. So Prince William County has already taken significant steps, I think, in the right direction by doing these things. The board has considered several additional tools and technologies as well that are still in their infancy, I would say. One being imprinters, which is a device that is already made by the vendor that we get our election equipment from, Hart. The imprinter is a device that puts a randomized serial number on ballots after they are cast. So it preserves the secrecy of the ballot, but it does enable a ballot level audit, because now every individual ballot is unique because of this randomized serial number. Ballot Verifier is a software program that was produced by a civic technology company called Severa. and it's a platform that packages existing ballot images and cast vote records from the machines and packages them for publication on the Office of Elections website, which then allows the public to review ballot level data. And when combined with publicly posted results tapes, these tools would allow any citizen or organization to conduct a ballot level audit independently, if that's how you choose to use your weekend. You and your friends can get together in your living room and do your own audit. You would have all the tools. These technologies, it's worth noting, are already in use in other jurisdictions, in other states and counties, like Tarrant County, Texas, and Ada County, Idaho. But because implementation in Virginia hinges on whether or not those things are compliant with the Code of Virginia. And so I sent a letter on the 22nd of October to the Attorney General. Attorney General Miyares may have to re-engage with this now that there's going to be a new Attorney General. But I sent that letter on the 22nd of October requesting an opinion from the Attorney General on the permissibility of publishing ballot images and cast vote records using this ballot verifier technology. A response to that letter is still pending, and it's also worth noting that should that practice be deemed permissible under the code, it would still require approval by the Electoral Board, as well as funding authorized by the Board of County Supervisors in a future budget. So, in conclusion, I will say that the Office of Elections, I believe, is engaged on multiple fronts, ensuring parity among election officers and chief positions, working toward those goals, strengthening oversight and accountability, and enhancing transparency in our processes. There are certainly challenges that still remain, specifically regarding access to Veris, as well as implementation of these new audit technologies. But I believe that the steps that we've taken do demonstrate the board and the Office of Elections' commitment to maintaining the integrity of elections and building public trust. My term on the Electoral Board is expiring. It concludes at the end of this month, and a new member will be appointed by the Democrat Party chairman to fill that vacancy, resulting in a board majority aligned with the governor's party in accordance with the Code of Virginia. It has been, I will say, it has been an honor to serve in this role, and I'm confident that the board will continue advancing the initiatives that we started, including these policy enhancements and technological improvements to further strengthen election operations and ensure that Prince William County remains the model of professionalism, compliance, and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me just echo what Marcus and Heidi have said in terms of the quality and the efforts of our registrar and our Office of Elections. We have made incredible strides over the years, and we've made incredible progress in almost every aspect of the way elections are run in Prince William County, and we owe a debt of gratitude to the office and the registrar. As Marcus mentioned, the election results will result in a new commissioner of the Department of Elections. It also results in a new member being appointed. And I think the chances are probably low that the Democratic Party will renominate Marcus to stay on the board, despite my lobbying for that. But in any event, I want to thank Marcus for his service on the board, and the effort that he's put in terms of transparency and making sure that things are run in a legal way, but also that people can have confidence in the results after the election is over. And so he's been a great board member, and I want to thank him for all of his efforts. So thank you. All right. So we now will move to presentation. So most of you know Kim Brace, I think. He's been a long-term election officer. He's one of those people that travels across the county wherever Dina needs to have somebody assigned. So he has a special status, and he's run his own election consulting business for years and years, and he did an analysis of the last election, some data and some maps, and so he asked for for some time to do a presentation. So we will hear from Mr. Brace for 10 minutes. And I'm going to keep this gavel close.
Gavel handy, yes, that's right, that's right.
So when you're ready to move to the next slide, just
Okay, terrific, all right, very good, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Board. It's a pleasure to be here. As noted, I have been long associated with this group and this organization. I was Eric before Eric was Eric. I was the acting registrar for, thank God, only 6 months on that side. But I was also heavily involved with what was our last fiasco in this county, which was long lines following the 2010 election. And I was one of the members of the board, the panel that was selected by the Board of Supervisors to study the long lines. And as such, I ended up becoming kind of the main data person. After all, data is not my middle name, but the middle name of my company, Election Data Services. And so we have long been associated with looking at and analyzing data. We do this after every 2 years. We publish the red and blue map, which I've given you copies of, so that you have those too. And we've done this since 1986 on that side. As I said, we've been heavily involved in looking at the election results for Prince William County since 2010 on that side. As a result, I do maps. I am involved very much with understanding the election results through graphics. And so I put together graphics from the 2025 election so that you could see what we were seeing in terms of data. This is, of course, the election results for governor. And you end up seeing in this slide what we've seen in all slides for the last 10 years. What you see is is this a pointer? Does this pointer work? No, okay. What you see in the southern part of the county is the Democratic area. The northern part of the county is the Republican area, and the middle part is Republican area also. This has been something that we've seen, as I've said, at least for the last 15 years on that side. We have more data this time so that we can see how this distinguishes between election day and the absentee ballots and the post-election ballots and the provisional ballots that you improve. So we've been able to map each of those separately on a precinct by precinct basis. As I said, you end up seeing this pattern also in other election results. The lieutenant governor's race, again, the southern part of the county being the Democratic area, and the northern part being the Republican area. The Attorney General's contest, you see the same pattern on that side. More on the Republican side through the middle part of the county, a little bit stronger on the northern part of the county on the Republican side. Again, the distinctions between the various ballot types in the maps that you see here. For state house races, you end up seeing the same kind of pattern, distinguishing for where we had elections for state house contests. And in the Gainesville district, we had a supervisor's contest. And so we were interested in how that looked. And what you end up seeing in this one is a similar pattern. This is the northern part of the county, being more on the Republican side. But you see down here in the bottom part which is down by city of Manassas and Manassas Park, you see the democraticness of this area down here and in Gainesville area. So you end up seeing this pattern even in the supervisory contests. We look at registration rates. What percent of the voting age population is registered? And you see distinctions even in this pattern. And you end up seeing registration rates being lower in the lower part of the county, the Democratic area of the county, and higher in the Republican area. That's registration rates of voting age population. When we look at the various ways of voting for the various, what we had in terms of early voting and election day comprised 52% of the votes that came in Prince William County. Early voting was 34%. There is a distinction, this is the overall result, there is a slight distinction between Republican and Democratic sides. Republican was 53 higher percent on election day than overall. And on the Democratic side, it's slightly lower. So there is some distinction in terms of party on that side too, in terms of the candidates. In terms of turnout, this is turnout of registration. And you end up seeing, this is the big problem that we have in this county. Down in the southern part of the county, the Democratic area, the turnout is not great. And that has been a pattern that has been there since I've been mapping here in the county. So you end up seeing this lower turnout down in the lower part compared to the upper part and the middle part on that side. This is of turnout of registered voters, and this is turnout of active registered voters on that side. Again, that same pattern though, you can see lower concentrations in the lower part of the county. So clearly, while Democrats have been able to carry, they're not turning out as much as what we see elsewhere. And that's what we've seen from the 2025 election on that side. I'd be happy to take questions, but I provide this for your information.
Any questions?
Mr. Brace, is that available on your website somewhere?
We've sent that to Eric, and he can put that out. I'd be happy to have that. That's no problem.
It's fascinating.
We ended up. I am also a member of the Historical Commission for the county, and I made this presentation to the Historical Commission last month. And so I bring it to you as from the election board also. They have published it on their site, but you can have it and you make use of it yourselves.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you there.
Thank you, Kim.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, the issue that created the election commission back in the day, fortunately, has not been an issue since we went to new voting equipment and paper ballots, but that was definitely, so it was the 2012 election, presidential election, and we were still using the touchscreen computers. And the turnout was very high, especially in some of the, the more Democratic precincts. And there were, one of the precincts in particular, all the machines were working, but there were amendments, there were constitutional, people were spending 10 or 15 minutes at the voting machine on their phone doing research. So we actually, there were several precincts that went way beyond 7 o'clock. The River Ridge, I think the last person voted around 11 o'clock. And, Jerry Conley had a hearing down here about the long line issue, and it was not just Prince William County. There were lots of places in 2012 that had, their major issue was long lines and people having to wait for hours. But fortunately, we've resolved that with the new equipment, and there's always something new that happens, but hopefully long lines is not going to be an issue that we'll have to deal with in the future. So, all right, thanks, Kim. So next we will move to the General Registrar's report.
Alrighty, yeah, improved lines is something I'm actually going to talk about today. I started in elections in 2010 and experienced the presidential in 2012 and thought, this is ridiculous, it doesn't need to be this way. And got a grant in 2015 to work with states to improve lines. So that's something I worked with about 10 or 12 states and Canadian provinces across the country on, basically just taking data, and it's all a process of how long it takes to check in, how long you're at the booth, how long you're at the scanner, how to not have lines build up at those locations. And we built modeling, and you know, one of the things that we do now is we use that modeling when we are, and we talked about that in some of our preparation things. So, you know, the changing issue of the day is always going to be different from election to election, year to year. And I think we do a good job of sort of meeting whatever that need is, and you have to be adaptable and prepared for that. So we're going to review the 2025 general election. So this is the post-election report on how we did, what we need to improve. Maybe Thalia can put a little post-election report right here floating in the air. Post-election report holiday special. Be looking forward to seeing the YouTube video now. All right, so I wanted to start off by noting on election night, I was able to see a lot of the you know, concession and victory speeches. So I wanted to pay a thanks to all of the elected officials at the state level and the local level. And I put a couple quotes here from Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears, who both in their speeches talked about the respect they had for the person. I know that in the middle of an election, that doesn't always come out as candidates try to differentiate themselves and try to do what they think will help them win. But it was really nice to see them talking about, both talking about their respect for the person and them talking about their willingness to continue to serve Virginians. And so I thought that was really laudable by all of the statewide candidates at the state level. I also saw that in our Gainesville special election as well, talking about the commonalities we have and the problems that we have to solve as a state, as a county, as a country. So I think that was really good. I noticed that the coverage on election night was about the candidates and the winners and the issues of the day. And as election officials, that is what we hope for, that we are in the background and not a significant story on election night, but that people are talking about who they voted for, why they voted for them, who won, and those kind of things. So that was nice to see. So an overview, just to note, coming out of this election in particular, elections are run very well in Virginia. I think that's an overall theme that we've seen. I think it's true here in Prince William County. I think we see that statewide, that we have a really good system in general, and we have really good people running these processes. So we give voters a lot of options here. They can vote by mail, they can vote early, they can vote on election day, and regardless of what process they choose to vote by, those processes are secure processes that have redundant features that make sure that, you know, only one person can cast a vote, and that we protect the rights of those voters along the way as well. So I think those are just important overview things to note. Elections are not perfect, but I think they're damn near close. So there are always little things that we are working on and trying to improve upon. And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the successes we had and some of the things that we've seen, that we've set as goals and that we've achieved. And then we're going to talk about areas that we need to improve, as incremental improvement is always something that is necessary. And as Marcus noted earlier, we've received multiple awards for transparency and best practices this year. So I think we're doing a good job of making sure to run that process well, and keeping an eye on what we need to continue to improve on is the way that you do that. Talking about voter turnout, highest gubernatorial turnout in 2 decades in Prince William County at 50.5% voter turnout. This sort of reflects a statewide trend where the last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years, we've seen a steady increase in similar types of elections as turnout inches up a little bit. I should note that it's not as high as it was in maybe the 80s and early 90s, where we had some 60% turnout contests there, so we're not at an all-time high here, but it is trending in that direction. Between the higher turnout and the increase in population in the county, we saw about 13,000 more voters in this election than we did in 2021, and we're seeing that kind of consistent upward trend of participation. You can see it here in the last 5 gubernatorial elections, and we kind of look at these when we compare elections. We look at them in like elections, because a presidential turnout to a governor's turnout to a local contest turnout are all going to be significantly different. So if you see here, 16 years ago was about 37%, and we've seen sort of an increase upward since that time. And certainly as the county has grown, that turnout is now more than twice the number of voters that we had in 2009 here in 2025. So that's a really significant number of individuals that we've increased to handle and assist with the voting process. You also see here that the Prince William County consistently lags in participation behind the state overall, usually about 3 to 4% per election. You can see some years it's within 1, some years it's as much as 5 in 2021, but usually the 3 to 4% is the lag, and there can be a lot of different factors that go into that. Certainly, if you look at the factors that cause people to vote, higher education is more likely to vote, minority population is less likely to vote, military members less likely to vote, young people less likely to vote. So I think if you look at a lot of those factors in Prince William County, a lot of those demonstrate why that lags a little bit behind. As Marcus noted, we'd love to see 100% in every election. This is not Australia, where they fine you if you don't go out and vote. So, but obviously our goal is to enable anyone in Prince William County that wants to vote to have an opportunity to do that. This got noted earlier. Election day, about 52%. Early voting, about 34%, and mail voting, about 13%, with about 1% of voters voting provisionally, mostly through that same day registration process. So what we're seeing in early and mail voting from 2021 to 2025 is a growth of about 18% in Prince William County, which very closely mirrors about a 19% increase in earlier mail voting across the state. So it's really inching closer and closer to that 50% line. I expect what we're going to see over the next 3 to 4 years is it's going to go past that 50% line, and that we're going to have more and more voters that are going to be voting early and by mail. I think that is a number of factors. If you look at other states that add early and mail voting options, they go up to usually 50 to 60%, and they tend to plateau somewhere around there, and then they kind of flatten. And I think we are coming up to where we are coming towards the plateau at this point, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But this was a good election to compare that, because 2020 was really when this all started, and that was during the pandemic. And comparing 2020 and 2024 data really doesn't give you any idea of the trend line. So this gives us a little bit better idea of the trend line. So I expect that to continue to grow, but I also expect that we're going to see that plateau in the coming years here. So a third of the voters used early voting. I think the ordinance from 2024 is mostly working well. With the top complaint being the DMV not being open, we get a lot of calls. How come the DMV is not open? I do think we put up signs, and we did send out voter guides to help assist with that, and that definitely helped and reduced some of those calls. We have had wait times that were basically non-existent. So I think the first day early voting opens up, we have some lines. The last day, especially Friday and Saturday, in the final couple days of early voting, you'll see a little bit of a line. But I think overall, your average wait time for early voting and for election day is probably somewhere between 0 and 2 minutes for probably 90% of our voters. I think we're doing really excellent in that, and that has been a great job by the operations team and the election officers at these sites. It's been a combination of learning from things and how we do things. So if Just as an example, the DMV is a very small room, but we did expand that from a couple of check-ins to 4 check-ins. We also added a scanner specifically for the curbside voting because we get so many curbside voters that we noticed that the scanner for the regular voters in the precinct was getting jammed up by curbside. It was too much traffic at the scanner. So some of those changes that we've made have really helped move people through and make sure that no one's having to wait in really long lines. And that's been true for early voting and for Election Day. So a big kudos to the operations team for all their work on that and learning lessons and applying them.
Do you know, is the DMV significantly higher in terms of the number of curbsides than the Gainesville Library or the office here?
I think the DMV just dwarfs any other site. I mean, I think if you took all the other sites combined curbside, I'm just going to say, this is a total guess, I'm going to say half. Half of all the other sites combined are probably half the total of the curbsides that we see at the DMV. So some of that is just the availability of the parking there, that the lot there lends itself better to that. And then I think people also use in the drive-through voting era, they use that a lot at the DMV, so people have kind of continued to use that. So this is the total number of voters by site. The DMV and Haymarket continue to be the most popular sites, especially during that last week. They are very busy. The main office is very close behind, being open for the full time. And then for Lazo, Dumfries, and Brentsville, not nearly as busy, but still a steady flow at those sites, especially for Lazo, because that was a site that was used some previously, and it's in a really dense, kind of centralized area there. This is just a little bit to show the pattern. This is a map from BPAP. They kind of track early and mail voting, and they do a really good job representing it graphically. You can see in 2021 and 2025 here. 2021, obviously we had the old ordinance with 3 sites around the county. 2025 with just the office until we get to those last couple weeks. 3 weeks for the presidential and then 2 weeks this election. You notice that the lag here really isn't that different with the 1 site than the 3. It does start to fall off a little bit towards the end. And part of this is because we had a lot of early mail voting coming in. But then you notice that it very quickly moves well past the 2021 voter numbers once those satellites opened. We had a huge first 3 or 4 days, a lot of people at all those sites getting out and voting, and then moving well beyond what we saw in 2021. And this is a pretty similar pattern to what we saw around the state, but I think it's showing that Prince William is kind of matching that, and also that the new ordinance is mostly working pretty well, and that it's allowing people to vote, and we're even seeing more voters with less sites early on, but more sites at the end when people are most inclined to vote. Those last 2 weeks, and the last week especially, is really when we see the heavy turnout during early voting. That's what the ordinance was kind of designed to capture, and I think it showed that it worked really well this election. This is interesting to see here the number of voters that we had before the satellites opened. So these would be voters that came to the main office to vote before the satellites opened. And I think per a lot of those calls we get about the DMV being open, you can see that the districts that are closest to the DMV, less than 1% of those voters turned out for those first 4 weeks and a day of voting here at the main office. And then the districts that were closer, you see turnout closer, usually 2 to 3%, with Coles being the exception, in the 5% range turnout just during those early weeks of early voting. A couple of maps here to kind of demonstrate that as well. These maps are roughly about, it cuts off a little bit here at the top northern western part of the county. Apologies to Heidi for cutting off at the thing, but it's trying to fit them all in. So these are the voters that voted at that main office during those first 4 weeks. You can see the distribution, and then you can see the eastern part of the county. So you see when you toggle between them, obviously the density is a lot higher in the western part of the county, which is all the more compelling because the area you're seeing there, like south of Manassas, for example, that is not a very dense area there. Those are a lot of half-acre and acre homes there. Whereas the part in eastern part of the county, these are a lot of denser areas with townhouses and apartment buildings being more common. So you're definitely seeing, fewer voters from there. Looking at this and kind of thinking about the data of that ordinance as well, I tested out what the drive times were in a number of different days this election, where if I took the same address in these different areas and then clocked it to the main office, how long did it take to get there? Because if you look on the map on the right there, and you look at where the star is, which is the main office early voting site, it really is pretty central in the county geographically. It's only slightly north and west of the exact center of the county. But that black line that you see on that map, that is the rough half line for the county. You can see it has the Potomac, all the population pretty much of the Potomac, the Neabsco, and the Woodbridge districts on the east side of it, and then all the populations of Coles, Brentsville, and Gainesville on the left side there, with Occoquan being somewhat split. So it's important to remember that about 70% of the geography of the county is you kind of have a 70-30 split with where the population actually hits 50%. And I think the drive times are a little slower from those eastern parts of the county in particular, because the density in those areas means the travel times are slower. Having lived over in that area previously, just know your time per mile is a lot more in the eastern part of the county than it is in the western part of the county. So you see that the time to get to the office from Haymarket, Gainesville, Bristow, North Manassas is somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes. Your time in the eastern part of the county is somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes roughly, and your average time is roughly about twice as long. So you can certainly understand some of the complaints and concerns we've had about it. I think that people still do have lots of voting opportunities, because once those sites open up, and knowing that people vote most often in the last 2 weeks, there are lots of locations for those satellites on all parts of the county, and they are more concentrated in the eastern part of the county because of that density of population. But I have a couple recommendations for the board to kind of consider, the electoral board to consider their feedback on, and then for the board of supervisors to consider. I don't think any of these are urgent or needed right away. I think these are something they could consider if they want to make changes to them. I do think it would probably make sense to open the DMV for 45 days before the general elections, and I say that for a few reasons. It kind of covers the county with 2 central locations. So if you look back at that map there, you'd have one location in sort of the middle of each half of the county's population would have a central location to go to. This is sort of the Goldilocks between the one site perhaps being slightly too little and 3 sites being too much and a little bit of wasted tax dollars. This would then put about 90% of the county within 20 minutes or less of an early voting site during the full period. And both the office and DMV are locations we control. I think this is pretty important because when we're talking about Haymarket, which is our other really popular location, that is a library office. We don't control that, and if we are there for the nice thing with being there for a shorter period of time is we get a bigger room there. And so we're able to get more voters through, and it's a much nicer location. When we're there for the full time, we're put in a smaller room. We are kind of a pain to the library while we're there. The throughput at Haymarket is much higher than the office or the DMV. So if we have a busy election, if Haymarket remains a satellite, we can get 5 or 6 check-ins there and we can push people through. We can't really do that at the DMV or the office. We're kind of at our max capacity for how many people we can get through in a day. And I say that with noting that the DMV crew has done a very good job of having days where they have 2,000 or 2,200 voters go through it back in 2024 and very little line buildup despite that. And I think the other thing about this is I think early voting is going to continue to grow. The county is continuing to grow as we've seen the pandemic sort of slowed construction. Now we're seeing projects, I drive by the courts district once in a while and you see the land being cleared out there. You see a lot of these little pockets in that eastern part of the county where little parcels of land that are now getting filled in with apartment buildings and townhouses. So I think that density is continuing to increase. And I also think that early voting is going to continue to uptick slightly. So I think we have to be cognizant of that sort of need. So this is sort of a map that represents, you see that county midpoint line there? You see where these locations are. And that the circles represent where most of the population is in that. So as you go towards, obviously, Potomac, the western 2/3 of that Potomac district is woods. So there's not a lot of population in that part of it. Same thing with, as you get towards the very western parts of Brentsville, the very northern parts of Gainesville, it's a lot, larger properties, lot more woods, and you sort of see that rural crescent there, outside of those circles. So it does put a location in the proximity of the most dense areas of the county. The other part that I would consider, that I would think the board would want to consider, both the electoral board and the supervisors, is the Brentsville Courthouse location, potentially replacing and or expanding Brentsville Courthouse to sort of, there's a couple things. One, the voting room at Brentsville is real small. I mean, it's tiny. It's smaller than the DMV. It's also not on a major road or utilized location. The DMV and the Haymarket Library and our office are all near the courthouse and DMV services and people going to the library. So they're at these intersection points where people are already going to them. And Brentsville is not like that. Dumfries Community Center, Ferlazzo, they're both right off Route 1. They're on a major road. And Brentsville's not like that. So Brentsville's kind of the one that stands out here. And the major population group, if you're looking at the map, where Brentsville's, kind of close to that intersection of Cole. It's sort of where Coles and Potomac Coles and Potomac meet. The Bristow area is really where the population is north of that. And the only trouble we have there is that there's not really a great public building in that area right now that we could utilize for early voting. So I think this would be a kind of a wait and see situation, but I could see expanding this to add more of a mid-county location, like a Kelly Leadership Center as a location, because that's on Route 234. Like other facilities, it's near the landfill, which gets a lot of traffic on any given day, and 234 is, we don't have a voting location on that, and it's really the fastest and most significant carrier of traffic in the county. Similarly, Bristow and Linton Hall area is a denser area and another location there. So I think in the longer term, with these two changes, that voter convenience is really the focus here. I think that politicians and legislators will get hung up on early voting, meaning that they're going to get more people voting because, the area that had the lowest turnout in the county this election has the highest concentration of early voting centers. So it doesn't equate to turnout, motivation, voter motivation, issues, candidates. Those drive turnout by party, not early voting locations. But I do think that for convenience, that the eastern part of the county right now doesn't have that location to sort of go to in the early part of early voting. Now you can vote by mail, so that is always an option. But there does seem to be, we've hit something of a plateau, it seems, on that, where there's a lot of people who really like mail voting, and they have used it, but we haven't seen a significant surge in mail ballot applications over the last couple of years. It's been relatively flat, just moderate growth on that. So I think this is all just continuing to make data-driven, incremental suggestions to the BOCS. Like I said, I don't think this is a urgent matter. But I think that in the longer term, as early voting grows, and as we're looking at the data here, and as we're looking at what is convenient for voters, that opening up the DMV for the full 45 days would make sense, and that looking at, in the longer term, where could we shift out of Brentsville potentially to a couple larger locations, one that's more focused on mid-county, which really doesn't have a good location on a major thoroughfare right now, and also another location in the western part of the county up towards Gainesville, Bristow, Haymarket, in addition to that Haymarket location that's in that denser area of the western part of the county. Any thoughts on early voting?
Well, I like the idea of opening the DMV earlier, obviously. Living on the very east side of the county, there's something, Hoadley Road is sort of like the whatever the dividing line. I mean, people on the east end of the county, if they think about driving to Manassas, and that's a field trip, you know. If I have to go past Hoadley, oh, that's too far to drive. And it's true. I mean, living now in Woodbridge, there are all sorts of areas around both Occoquan and Woodbridge where there are large apartment complexes being built. You know, the people, I don't know if you're familiar with Minnieville, the junkyard that's been there for, you know, forever, is closed. There's a whole new residential development going to be built next to Ebenezer Baptist Church. So, yeah, there's a significant increase in population on the east end of the county, and I think that's going to grow, you know, the way things are moving. So, having the DMV, you know, open for the same time for the whole 45 days to me makes sense. And I mean that's the only complaint that I've heard about the ordinance, that you know, people on the east end don't want to drive all the way to Manassas, and so they'll wait until the last 2 weeks, or they'll do it by mail. But I think you know, given the population trends, it makes some sense to open the DMV for the whole period.
Yeah. It's interesting how those areas become kind of foreign like that. I mean, if you're in the east part of the county, you have all the restaurants and shopping and stuff you need, and same thing in the western part of the county. So why would you travel across? I used to mark my time in the district by the last time I had gone outside the Beltway, and it was often, you know, weeks or even months apart, because you do get in that kind of world. So, well, something for future consideration, and I am giving a report to the Board of County Supervisors in January, so it'll going to cover a lot, a condensed version of what we're talking about today, basically for them, just sort of a check-in. When I started, they brought me in and they got kind of grilled, and I'd only been there like about a week, and they seem very pleased with the performance of our agency over the last 4 years. But I hadn't really gone back and given them an update on kind of what we've been up to. So this is sort of a chance to talk about what we've been doing, the improvements and changes we've made, and then some of this kind of stuff as we look towards the future. And certainly the early voting ordinance is the supervisors' big, they govern our budget and they govern the early voting ordinance, and those are their two big areas where they govern the Office of Elections, basically. So, mail voting participation, we had just shy of 30,000 applications. We had about 21,000 mail ballots cast. That's about a 73% turnout rate. There's a significant increase in early ballots returned. So we had roughly half, or a little over half, of those ballots in the first 3 weeks, and it usually tends to sort of mirror early voting, where you get some ballots coming in those first few weeks, but then it really picks up towards the end. And this election, we didn't have a late surge because we'd already had so many voters early on. So excellent work by the mail voting team in getting all that processed and handling all that. Really went off without a hitch this election. I wanted to note ballot curing. So ballot curing, again, is when a mail ballot has an issue that Virginia code prevents from being eligible to be counted unless the voter cures that issue. So an example would be there's certain information you have to complete on the ballot envelope that you return. So if you don't put your year of birth, if you don't sign the form, that ballot can't be counted unless that issue is cured. And the voter can cure that by, there's a state form that they have that they can return. They can come to our office. We can reissue them another ballot, and they can try again, and we will, cast aside the other ballot. So those are all valid ways to cure that ballot.
Cure the envelope.
Cure the envelope, yes. Sorry.
We don't cure ballots.
No. So of the ballots that were returned, we ultimately had 237 that were rejected. So there were about 990 that needed curing, the envelopes that needed curing. So 753 of those were cured by the voter, 237 of them were not cured. That's a 76% cure rate. That is a high for the county. I wanted to note this in relation to time too. This is a really important factor. When you return your ballot, if you return your ballot before the last week of early voting, there's an 88% chance that you were able to cure that issue with your envelope. If you returned it in the last week before early voting or on election day or just before election day, there's only a 46% cure rate. So obviously, the sooner you get your mail ballot back in, the more easily you can deal with an issue that comes up and the more likely you are to cure it. Some of those ones that come in on election day, you know, we contact the voter, but they just don't always have a lot of time. Maybe they've left town. Maybe we don't have a good contact number for them to reach them. So that is a really key change. You can see it's basically, you're about twice as likely to cure your envelope if you submit it before that final week of early voting. Trend-wise, our cure rate, I noticed it noted as the highest ever. I set a challenge to our mail ballot team a couple years ago to really improve and get that number up, and they have. It's gone from 53% in 2022, and you can see a steady increase up to 76% in 2025. The needing cure, how many ballots need to cure, it kind of bounces around some. It's somewhere between 3 and 4.5%. Unfortunately, we were a little on the high side for that one on this one. I think we actually had noticed our biggest challenge was the year of birth and the social security number. Those are the most common things that people were missing. So we added gray boxes that denoted the 4 digits, because some people were putting in, it would say a year of birth and they'd put in December 3rd, and it's like, so close. And so that wouldn't count in that instance. So we modified the form to sort of correct this and also to guide people to make sure to pay attention to it. And it worked. Those errors were less this time. Unfortunately, the signature after it increased. The number of instances where they missed the signature went up. And that was our most common issue this election. So 30% of the people that needed cure were because of no voter signature. Social Security and year of birth still continue to be high factors. So if you look at those top 3 there, that's about 70% of the issues is no signature, no Social Security last 4, no year of birth, or it's incorrect, not matching with the database, something like that. The address being wrong, missing, or incomplete is just over 10%. The information field just being left blank entirely was about 10% of these issues. And then there were some other random ones, different things that fall in the miscellaneous category. So we've improved the cure rate because the state cure form has been a big part of that. The state has a standardized form now that we use. We've also improved communication by our office. We have a standard process of contacting the voter within a certain amount of time after we've recognized that they need cure. And then we do have a follow-up process as well. And there's also automated processes. So we use something in Airtable, and we're able to automate some of that process as well. So some of this is challenging because we don't always have an email for the voter. We don't always have a phone number. So the contact information is not there 100% of the time. But we are improving there. For comparison, you can see that overall our need cure is a little bit higher than Loudoun, who's a sizable neighbor. Our cure rate was a tiny bit better than theirs, and our rejected ballots were slightly higher than theirs, but both around 1% overall, basically.
Before you move on.
Yeah.
So are you satisfied with the vendor that we're using now for all the mail process?
Yeah, I think they're doing really well. I think what we're going to look at is this required information field and looking at how we can redesign that to maximize people not getting it wrong. I mean, 95.5% of people are not having a problem with it. So obviously, I think if you have the best form possible in the world, you're still going to get 2% of the people are still going to miss it. And if you have the worst form in the world, probably 6 or 7% are going to miss it. And we're somewhere in between that right now. So we're looking at how we can improve that. But no, I think the vendor does an excellent job. I think, ballot tracks is such a good system too. We have that. If you're a Fairfax County voter, you have that option. And I didn't even include this in there, but we had huge increases in the number of people that signed up for ballot tracks. Do you know what number we're at, Natalia?
Yep, pulling it up right now.
Okay, so while Natalia's pulling that up, showing what we added a thing inside the flap this time, and it just said, put your phone number here if you want to receive text updates. And a ton of people, thousands of people, put their phone number in there. So we made it really easy to do that, and we were able to get a lot more people. So and if you use that service, that's a huge help, because then you know where your ballot is. You're getting a text message. So if there are problems, you're going to find out. If we've gotten your ballot, you're going to find out. So you're more engaged with the process overall.
Then does that information, that cell phone number, get added to the voters' I don't know, profile or contact information?
Yeah.
You said some voters we don't have email or phone
Yes.
number, so then
Yeah.
does that get added?
Yes, so we have increased contact information for them as well. And then it also, not only are they signed up for the automatic text messages, but we can contact them then if in instances where maybe they either didn't have a phone number, or maybe they had, registered 15 years ago and they used their house number and they have a different mobile number now. So, now we would know that. So it's 9,135 voters.
So that's how many we gained in
Okay.
6 months.
So we added 2,200 voters in the last 6 months, and we're now to over 9,000 voters. So that is roughly a third of the voters that are getting mail ballots are getting the ballot text messages, and they're really good. They're plain English. They're very easy to read and understand, and then it gives them also information for to get help and support if they need it as well. So anyway, yeah, I think the vendor's been doing great. We're really pleased with that. And we just want to look at this box and see if there's something we can redesign to make it work better. The challenge is always space. There's a certain number of state requirements that we have to put on the envelope, and so it only leaves a certain amount of space for the flap and the form. And so getting that to be clear, easy to use, and in that limited amount of space is a challenge. But clearly, 96 to 97%, 95% of the voters are not having a problem with it. And thankfully, now 3/4 of the ones that do encounter a problem are fixing that to keep our number of rejected ballots pretty low. Any other questions about mail voting? All right, Election Day. The operations team continues to test all of our equipment, prepare for facilities, and meet the logistical needs of 103 polling places and officer teams to ensure the voting process is safe, smooth, and accurate. Another excellent job from start to finish on this by the team. Just very few facility issues, very few equipment problems, very few supply delivery issues. The amount of logistics that goes into getting all the forms ready, making sure the sites are prepared, it's a lot of components to it. The 3 people on that team do an excellent job, and the temps that support that process as well. So our call log for Election Day, we log all of our calls on Election Day to Chief HQ, which is basically our officer support line. So if the officers have a question, a problem, anything equipment that's having an issue, we had 247 calls from them, 383 calls to the main office, which those tend to be voter questions. The officers occasionally will call there, but mostly it's a voter calling in. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to vote is probably our most common question. And then during early voting, the last couple weeks of early voting, we also tracked for the office. We had about 440 calls for just a little over 1,000 calls there. Only 22 of those were logged as concerns and complaints. I've actually gone through them. I think we categorized like 36 as concerns, complaints, but once I went through and read them, I was like, well, this one's really just a question. So not a lot of issues. Here's what the call log revealed. Campaigners and voter, someone complaining about a campaigner, or I didn't like what this voter was doing, which is something we don't have any control over really. That was 6 of those instances. Mistakes that officers make were 5, regrettable, but we do try to train them as best we can to not make mistakes. A lot of miscellaneous stuff. One person really didn't like the sticker. One person couldn't find their way to Colgan. So just different things. Privacy issues from a couple people, facility issues from a couple people, registration issues from a couple people, but not a lot in the grand scheme of things. The state also has a online complaint form, and I would say we got the fewest complaints of any general election I've been a part of through that system, only 5 or 6. A couple of them, legitimate issues. There were, I think, 2 that were, somebody got checked in. Usually a family member. Sometimes they check in the father or the son by accident, and the other one has to vote a provisional ballot, which is a regrettable mistake, but does happen in basically every jurisdiction to a few people each election. Thankfully, they are able to vote through the provisional process. So, overall equipment deployed: 326 poll books deployed, 120 ballot scanners, and 103 ADA machines. We didn't have any scanner or poll book failures on election day. We had some poll books at opening that we had to work with the officers. I think we had about 12 calls about that, which wasn't too bad, to help them get set up at the start of the day. We did have 1 scanner failure during early voting that we replaced. Other than that, the machines and the equipment worked like they were supposed to. Chief HQ, only 25 calls logged in the first hour. It was quiet there. It was really quiet. It scares you as a director. You wonder if something
Are the phone lines down?
horrible has happened, and the problems that we normally see are not there. So that was really good. Just only a few calls per support line over that first hour. Only 10 calls to support poll books before opening of polling places at 6 a.m. A few other locations that we had to follow up with just after that. But they all had poll books up and running at the start. They all had scanners up and running at the start. So we didn't have any locations that weren't ready to service voters at 6 a.m., which was great. If you look at the arrival pattern on election day, it was really interesting. I thought our turnout was actually going to fall a little bit below the 2021 election when we got to midday, because it just hadn't picked up. And then really in the afternoon, between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, it really picked up. And it went from, you can see it's very steady throughout the day. After that first hour, for those people that go to get their vote in before they head up to the district or whatever their job is up the road, mostly about 7%, 7.5% each hour. And then you get to 3 o'clock and it's 8.3%, 9.6%. It really picked up towards the end of the day. So the procrastinators came out and they got their vote in the last 4 hours of a 45-day voting process. So, but that's a lot of voters in that span. That's 30,000 voters in just that last 4 hours there, over 30,000. So overall, poll books perform much better than past elections. We have a few ID scanners that are going to need replacement. So we're going to have to spend a little money on that, but they're luckily not an expensive peripheral device, pretty cheap. And a few difficult campaigners or observers were the most significant issues of the day. Usually, if the election's going really well, your most common issues are the people outside the polling place, because disagreement between voters or a campaigner that's a little too aggressive or some things like that. So pretty smooth day overall. Voter credit versus ballots cast. We always talk about this in certification. So when you go to give people voter credit, which is the poll books, versus the ballots that have actually been cast on the machine, they don't always match up exactly right, because an officer maybe checks in a voter and then the voter decides not to vote, or a officer is about to check in somebody and somebody comes up and talk to them and they go and hand the ballot to the person while they're having the conversation. So about 70 less check-ins than we had ballots cast, and that's only 0.08% of all election day voters. Early voting, it's even better. It's 0.005%. It was only 2 less check-ins. So it indicates a really high accuracy rate by the officers. And it also notes that the more experienced early voting officers are going to make fewer mistakes, which sort of gives an indication that it's not necessarily the use of the poll book, which can be a problem. I know there are some usability issues with our poll books that I would love the design to be a little different than it is. But when you see the early voting officers who are there, they're more experienced. They're also doing it every day, so they've been doing this for weeks and weeks. They get used to the process, and you see fewer mistakes from them in what amounts to a similar number of voters overall, a much lower error rate. In terms of staffing, our team continues to meet a complex list of required staffing requirements, staffing numbers, parity, officer requests, electoral board demands, all of these things that go into a matrix of what we have to do to make sure our polling places are properly staffed for election day, and they do a great job at that. Staffing was excellent across the board. Officers rated the staffing team very highly, so kudos to the staffing team for that. We had parity for all of our early and mail voting teams being the processing teams once those ballots come back, the officer teams. We had compliance with leadership parity, as Marcus noted. All the precincts had officers of both parties, an equal number or one off in that 10-20, and Marcus noted it was about a 93% with the code has this little nuance for it can be one off if it's is it an odd number or an even? I get it confused. Odd. Okay, if it's odd, then it can be one off, and if it's even, it has to be the same. So it's a little bit of a challenge and hard to get that exact, but 93% pretty darn good, especially because the officers change. The work by the staffing team for those last 3 or 4 days before the election is always a little bit of a I wouldn't say a panic, but it gets, yeah, it's a scramble. That's a good way to describe it, Marcus. So only 7 precincts not meeting that odd even compliance, but ultimately all of them being within one officer of the number of Republicans and Democrats. I think probably most importantly, the goal that the board set for 728 election day officers was exceeded, 749 officers, and you can kind of see the variation here by party. You see that there's a big drop off that final draft on the 20th of October until election day over those 2 weeks. You see that we lose a lot of officers, and that is, Dean and Rick taking officers that are dropping out and then adding officers in. You can see that the Democratic total doesn't change much, and I think that's due to the fact that we have a really deep bench there. So we have a lot of other Democrats that we can plug in to fill holes of people that are departing. On the Republican side, we have some, but it's very limited. And then, of course, if you get into the factors of where it is, if it's in precinct 608, you've got someone in 103, they might not want to work there, or they might not be able to work there. So it still ends up pretty close, and that is why the team tries to edge the Republican numbers up a little bit higher leading into the end. But still very good totals in terms of the staffing overall. Couple other notes, we had 62 language officers providing Spanish support. Our show-up rate was 97.3% on election day, which is really outstanding. Credit to the officers. There's always a few people that have sick or family emergencies, but they're really reliable in showing up. I can tell you in DC, I was happy if I had 90% show up, so 97% is fantastic. Staffing team has really taken what was a weak spot when I started here. Staffing overall, parity, all of those things, all that complex matrix, and made it a strength of our agency. So kudos to them for really excellent work there. They've done this by making upgrades to their database tool, by sending weekly emails to the election officers, and we get more than 400 post-election survey responses from the officers so that we find out what they think, how they think we're doing, what we can improve. And they're giving the staffing team excellent marks. 86% said excellent, 13% said good, and 1% said fair or poor. And 90% of the officers said they are very likely to return. So that's a really good retention ratio. And this sort of shows you the trend line that we have gone from being upper 60s, low 70s in terms of our excellent rating, and our good rating being up higher, closer to 25 or 30%, and really that has kind of flipped. That good rating has steadily gone down to half that, and that excellent rating has rose. So that's a really good sign of the communication and the proficiency of our team. Training overview. Kudos to Daniel Garrigan for his first election as a trainer with the Office of Elections. Leadership training had the highest scores we've ever achieved. So way to set your bar too high for yourself there, Danny, your first time out. We got a 77% excellent score, 21% good, and 2% fair or poor. So I think election officer training was rated very well, but does need a little bit of improvement. We had, I think something happened there. Officer training, does need a little improvement, it's on the right track. And I say that, and then I feel like a little bit of a jerk as a boss because they got a 99% excellent or good. And I'm like, it needs to be better. So that gives you an idea of what Dan's in for, having a boss who spent 7 years as the lead trainer and training manager for another jurisdiction. But Dan's doing an excellent job. He's a very engaging trainer, and we got good feedback from the officers on him. And here you see that score. Again, the trend line is up. We've gone from lower 40s, excellent, up to mid 60s, excellent. So we'd like to continue to move that up. It's not going to be as easy as the staffing rating. I don't think you're ever going to get quite as high because training and people's experience with it is just much more subjective at the end of the day. So that's a very good score. And as always, I want it to be better. So we'll continue to work on that. So kudos to Dan for top leadership score already. I think it's a real testament to what he's doing, that he's already improved on our last general election in his first general election here. So excellent work on the training side of things. In terms of provisional ballots, we had almost 2,200 provisional ballots. 230 got rejected. Here were the reasons for those. Mostly people being in the wrong voting location and missing the provisional form information. So we're looking at all these and trying to determine, John has put together for all of the officers a report on what you did well on, what you need to improve on, to sort of give them some guidance on where they were making mistakes. And when we look at these in particular, we look at, well, is this a mistake by the officer, or is this a mistake by the voter, or is it a little bit of both? So we're trying to look at the things that we can improve on and looking at how we might change things to make that better in the future. The wrong voting location, just as an example, that can be the officer not directing the person to the right location. It can also be the voter comes at 6:20 and it's 40 minutes before closing and they go, I just want to vote. Or I have seen voters where the officer has told them, this is the wrong location, your ballot won't count. I don't care, I just want to vote. So it's hard to know with some of these, but we do want to look at it and make sure we have as few errors as we can as possible there. But provisional ballots are a challenge. So we're looking at a ton of potential improvements here. Training changes. Maybe we assign responsibility to a specific person in the precinct. Maybe the assistant chief is our provisional guru and they are in charge of being on top of that. Looking at a voter quality control process, something where the voter would then go back and, you give them a sheet and say, can you make sure I did this, and making sure that the officer is doing all the things they were supposed to do. Looking at a digital validation process as a possibility. Looking at a voter acknowledgement form. So we're kind of in the brainstorming stage of this, of looking at, hey, we've gotten better. How can we continue to push that forward? On the communications front, we did our second open house this year. Was a real good success. It was, sold out again. It's free, so it's not really sold out, but we had all the spots filled for this one. We didn't do quite as many spots as we had last year. We did one day instead of two, but we're not going to have nearly the interest in a non-presidential year as we would in a presidential election year. So a really good feedback on it. We had a number of some state legislators and some county supervisors came the last time as well as this time, so it's great to engage with them and walk them through the process. They are obviously they've been successful getting elected, but that doesn't always mean they know how that process works for all the components of it. So that was really effective. Really effective social media use. I wanted to compliment Thalia on our significant number of impressions. So we had a couple of tweets this election that got up to, these two here on successive days had 30,000 and 70,000 impressions for each of them. I can tell you that there was no other election agency or the state that had this many impressions on their social media for this past election. So we far and away, with our little 550 followers, had a really big and a lot of reactions to a lot of our posts, and Thalia's done really nice with some of the graphics there. You can see the early voting open late that we do on Wednesdays, and a lot of data too, a lot of things about turnout, and that really gets people interested and excited and really gets a lot of shares and impressions and views, which hopefully then translates to people going and looking up their early voting site and figuring out where they're going to vote. To that end, we also sent out a voter guide. We sent one to each household around the county. It went out in early to mid-October, I would say. So sort of once early voting was a little bit in flight. We've tried it before early voting. I think sometimes I think where we did it, we actually landed pretty good. Because a lot of times if it's too early, people are like, oh yeah, it's in the future. But if you kind of hit them up with 3 or 4 weeks maybe before the election, then it becomes more actionable. Like, oh yeah, I see the sites are opening up next week near me. Maybe I'll go over there and vote. So I think maybe that helped with some of our numbers in terms of those early voting numbers. So I think we'll continue to do that. And I think compliment Thalia on the visual aspect of this. It's been very easy to read. I know it's gone through a lot of rounds of review and redrafting and continuing to try to make sure that it is something that is easy to read, because I go to a lot of elections websites, and I've seen over the years here in Virginia, other states, it's just kind of a list, and it's hard to so I think the visuals here are really helpful to making it, giving good comprehension from voters who are using it. That's it for the post-election wrap-up. The other stuff I have is pretty small. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns?
That's very good. Thank you.
Are we on the right track with the things we're trying to improve?
I think so.
Yes, I do like the fact that you, everything is, as I said at the very beginning, everything is done very, very well. But there are times and areas for improvement, which you also focus on. And poor Dan. You got a lot to do there. But so this has been very, very helpful. Again, reassuring, I think, to the public that the way business is conducted here is very professional. And to go to Marcus's points, it's accountable, transparent, and effective. So good job.
Thank you. I think it's important to share the things we're doing well, but I think it's
Yes.
also important to look at the
Where-
things where we need improvements and where it's like, okay, well, these things are all good, but there's always,
Yeah.
stuff to improve. I remember I had an officer in DC at one point who said, we talked about that cycle about we get feedback, we make improvements, and he said, well, when does that end? And I said, never. It never ends. We do it till the end of time. It's a constant process. So, I'm grateful to have a board that gives me good feedback on that and provides good ideas, and a staff that provides good feedback and ideas. And it's always great when John or Natalia come into my office and say, "Hey, I got this idea to do this." Sounds great. Go, go make it happen.
Go
So they do excellent work. All the teams do excellent work, and I think we're constantly trying to improve things. So that's how you continue to innovate and win awards. And winning awards is nice, but what it represents is that we're giving good services to our voters and making our process transparent and making it accountable. So okay, so. This is an addition. I just came through. John sent this to me a day or two ago because they just presented it yesterday at the Board of County Supervisors meeting, which is the space study for the county on the office space for the county and the long-term development plans. When Court's getting a little older at this point, and the county is trying to look at space needs. So they did a study assessment, and this is the portion of the Office of Elections section. And it did talk about the fact that I've highlighted that, you see undersized here, undersized, does not have proper queuing or ballot storage, significantly undersized. Current space makes meeting these requirements difficult, creates major inefficiencies. Parking for both staff and the public is a major issue for the Lee Avenue location. So we make it work at our little bunker, our humble little bunker here on Prince William County Island. Which isn't a great thing either. The fact that our office is really a couple miles from any of our voters in Prince William County, because the city of Manassas surrounds us. The only way to get closer is to go to jail, but I don't recommend that as a way to be closer to the voting location. So the study assessment was really good. So we've worked with this team from Dewberry that's been doing this. They've come to our office and they've looked at some stuff. We've talked with the county facilities. They've gone out to our warehouse. We've talked about different possibilities. We talked about adding a training center potentially at the warehouse. We talked about changing warehouse locations, which that may be in the near future anyway, because the lease where we're at our warehouse at is kind of on uncertainty. But for the long-term future, they're looking at office space is currently about 5,100 square feet. They're looking at a future space that would be 5,500. And this would be located in, they're going to do an expansion of the development services building, which is sort of the glass building right behind McCourt down at County Center there. That would be a much better, more central location for early voting as like a main location. This would also increase our warehouse from about 13,000 feet to 27,000 feet, which is important both because our current space is tight, but also the new equipment we're getting. We're going to be adding more scanners. There's just a continuing number of needs. So I think this looks like a good possibility. I'm sure this will happen when I'm no longer in this position, but there is some talk about that. So I don't know. John, did you have a chance to see the supervisors meeting yesterday?
Not yet.
Okay. So I know they talked about it yesterday. They had a presentation. If you're interested in checking out the video from the county, I'm sure they presented some information on there, and they do have a report online as well. So interesting stuff. We'll kind of see how that plays out. In the more immediate future, the owner of the warehouse, the county has our space and another department's lease space there. That landlord is considering getting rid of that property, selling that property. So we may have to move our warehouse here in the next year or two. Uncertain about that. That would probably be a net positive for us, because I'm pretty sure wherever we go, it would probably be closer to our office, and it would probably be more square footage. So we will keep the board apprised of where that more recent development goes, and then we will keep an ear out for this future development. Another decision from last week was the school calendar came out for Prince William County Public Schools. And there's a potential conflict of dates. Unfortunately, the last day of school, this is 2027, I should do it, not next year. 2027, the last day of school is June 17th. And the primary is 2 days before that. So I'm not sure how if the county realized that. I know in some of these previous scheduling cycles, they have, contacted us about it, and I don't think we had any input on this one. So I do plan to just send a letter to the school board and the superintendent, and I'll CC the board, just notifying them it's a potential conflict. It's not that we can't hold elections while school's in session. It just makes it a lot harder for everyone involved. Parking becomes harder for voters. The rooms that we're in these locations often are less desirable, where we're getting a smaller room that might create crowding or line issues. It's not as much of a problem for a primary generally, but also just the safety of the schools. I think the school's general position in all the counties that I've been in is we'd rather be closed on election day, because it's just easier for the safety of the children. So
There's also an issue with, well, we're closed. So, I mean, my recollection is that the school board has said for presidential years, you'll have the building completely to yourself. But for non-presidential years, like this last November, even though school is not in session, they're still doing, before school activities, counseling. I this past November, driving around on election day, especially the elementary schools, they still had kids and parents coming and going, and parking was an issue.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that they're saying, well, we're going to be closed on elections day, but being closed, that doesn't necessarily mean that there still aren't teachers and staff and people coming and going in the schools. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what they do. I know in the past, it was a couple years ago. I don't remember when it was, but they had scheduled one and they made a late decision. John had sent them a letter, and they closed schools for that day just a few months before it happened. So I feel like with ample time, I'm guessing they would be inclined to close that day, but it's probably a challenge now because June 17th is a Thursday. If they just said, well, we'll just have kids go till Friday, June 18th is the Juneteenth holiday, and I'm guessing they're not going to want to do an in-service day for teachers 2 days before school closes. So, so anyway, it's a potential issue, and we'll communicate it to the schools, and ultimately it's their their decision, and they have their processes that they have to consider as well. But just make sure that it didn't get somehow missed in that process, because I know that's happened before. Okay. Last item is just, only item of new business here is just budget recommendations. And I gave you guys a sheet that sort of detailed that. And so we went through and presented, we have a meeting with the General Government Services Group, which is, we're in a cluster with our office and HR and IT and General Services. And we had a budget meeting with them, and there's a number of things that have kind of come up in the last, we discussed this in, I think, July and August, at the end of the summer, maybe September as well, going into the budget season, which for us, we have to submit our budgets in October, and then that sort of gets flushed and moved around a little bit until the budget is kind of finalized for presentation to the supervisors in the spring. And I sent a long email to the board about this and said that I thought we ought to keep our operational increase in our outreach request for FY27, and then we ought to shift our poll book purchase to FY28. And this is for a couple reasons. One, we had better than expected poll book performance in November, so that was good. I think there are still some concerns about the company stability and some of the past issues that have happened, but they've supported us well, and the poll books were stable, and the officers are going to make a certain number of mistakes on poll books and the best equipment. And I don't know that the number of mistakes they made was either directly related to the poll books or was excessive based on the poll books that were there. Two, the difficulty of simultaneous implementations, and by that I mean putting in place the election equipment and the poll books at the same time can be a lot of change to sort of manage for the operations team, and can lead to mistakes and problems. I experienced that. When I was started in DC in 2010, we were just going through a full refresh of our equipment. They changed a bunch of laws. It was kind of a mess for an election because so many changes in what the officers were supposed to do, the equipment they were using, just made it really difficult. So unfortunately right now, we were hoping that the state equipment, the ballot scanners and the ADA machines that we've assigned, haven't signed an agreement to purchase yet, but got the funding for and are close to signing an agreement on. There's just been a delay in that certification at the state level. The EAC, the federal agency that certifies equipment, certified it in June, and the state was hopeful to have it done by September. Still has not happened. I did talk with them, and they said they didn't think that the change of administration would be a further delay, because it's really more of this is a lot of their technical staff doing this stuff. It's not really like a decision point, but that doesn't mean that won't be the case. So it's a little uncertain right now. I'm surprised they haven't certified it yet. We don't know what that date will be. We also now have a 2026 election calendar, which is, it's going to be a little bit of a mess. So there is the potential amendment to redistrict, which seems likely to pass based on last year. When that would make a special election, potentially April, a statewide constitutional amendment special election. Will that shift the June primary? Because how do you have a mid-April redistricting, complete the redistricting process, and start early voting within 2 weeks of that vote if the current primary date stands? I think we're probably going to have a special election now. Literally, found that out this morning. So I think Spanberger is. I don't know if it's public news yet, so I'm just going to say is likely tapping one of our delegates for the administration.
There's an article about it.
Oh, is there an article? Okay. So Candy King is going to be in the Spanberger administration. I'm not even sure of the position. Secretary? Okay. So that means a special election for us. So we are looking at the potential for what I thought was probably 3 elections next year and could be 4 elections next year now.
Well, and if Candy if she resigns, then we're gonna have a special election like early in January.
Yes.
Because before the General Assembly convenes, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Happy holidays. Marcus, you're picking a great year to step off the board, I have to say. So it's gonna be a busy year from us. I sent an email to staff already before that had even happened, just saying, hey, you're gonna have to be cognizant of our, vacation time and things like that this coming year, because there's just a lot of uncertainty around a lot of these issues. So anyway, trying to figure out where in the calendar, especially with this additional special election now, where we're gonna shoehorn in, replace our equipment, train the officers on it, redo the manual to fit it is gonna be a challenge as it is. So redoing the manual for the scanners and the ADA and also new poll books would be a lot. And I think that shifting that and saying, okay, well, we're gonna try to figure out where we're gonna get the scanners in once they get certified by the state in 2026, and then we would shoot to get the budget for the poll books in fiscal 28, so that in 2027 we can implement those, would be the hope. I think the other thing is that there's a budget cap for initiatives by agency. I think because of some of the sort of regional economic uncertainty right now, the county has set a budget for each agency. Now, I went to the budget presentation, and us, like many of the other agencies, were asking beyond what that was because, especially in the general services group, there's a lot of compliance demands. The IT, the facilities, our group, we are subject to a lot of state law changes and compliance things that we don't have control over that are often unfunded at the state level, even though they're legislated there. So our cap was around $315,000. Now that doesn't mean we couldn't ask for $1 million and potentially get it. But I do think that if we're looking at that cap and saying, okay, if we ask for these other 2, they're right around that total. I think they're about 380 some. And then if we get the poll books in FY 28, and I know from talking with No Inc., we could potentially split that over a couple fiscal years. So we could split that, would probably be $800,000 purchase, maybe a little more. So we could potentially split that. So we're coming in around $400,000 in each of the upcoming fiscal years, which puts us close to what the county's goal is for us. So I do always try to make arguments that we are, obviously not a huge agency, so our budget impact of being a little over is not as much as, IT or facilities and fleet management or some of those other larger agencies. But, we do try to be good partners with the county, and we do try to make sure that we are cognizant of the, tax dollars that we spend. And I think that the operational component of this that you'll have, which is I think about $290,000, is basically stuff that we really need to continue to provide our services at the level that we have. And it's not one particular thing. It's our allotted amount of overtime is really unrealistic, even though I think we're much better than your average agency at managing overtime. The number of temps that we need more support for that. We need postage for the voter guide is pretty expensive. So I feel like we can cover the printing with our current budget, but not also the postage. So it's just a lot of little things that add up. And then the outreach person, I just think that's important from all of the things we've been talking about, from assisting people with voter registration to explaining our equipment that we're going to be getting over the next couple years to voters and helping them with how to use that, to spreading our transparency initiatives to make sure that voters understand how the voting process works and how election security works. So I think all of those things kind of swirl together to, we really need another person to assist with that process, because at this point on communications, Thalia is pretty maxed out with, our social media, our documents, our forums, our whole variety of communications things that we do. And to be fair, in the last 4 fiscal years, Loudoun County and Fairfax County have added 6 additional FTEs. We've added 1. So I think we're doing a good job of not only our agency performance, but managing our resources and not, over asking for things we don't need. But I do think that there are, the county gets bigger, there are change needs, so there are needs for just incremental changes to that. So anyway, that is my recommendation at this point, is that we kind of shift those budget priorities to match what the county's demands are and to sort of meet the realities of all of those things that have happened in just the last 3 months, basically. And so since we finalized the submission of that budget request, the certification, the potential April election, and then redistricting, all these things have sort of popped up since then. So I'm eager for feedback from the board on what you all think of how we manage that going forward.
So I agree with postponing the poll book purchase, and I agree with going forward with the baseline operational increases, but I do not agree with the extra position. That has been my view all along, and nothing has changed to change that view.
I also agree that not a good year to transition equipment. Way too many unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. And so threatening the stability of a system that is working well enough at the moment. Again, I'm not as optimistic and confident in our current poll books as you are. I'm glad they performed well in this last election, but I'm still a little bit stung from the 2 prior to that.
Yeah.
So recognizing it's still something that we want to do, but this year's not the year to do it.
Yeah. I agree with you too, Marcus. I wouldn't say I'm highly confident. I just feel like they met a baseline need for what we need them to do to assist voters with this process, but for the intervening variables here, would agree with the poll books being the top priority, and that's what I presented to the county manager and Office of Management and Budget was poll books, baseline operational improvements, outreach position as our 1, 2, and 3, because the county they require us with our initiatives to rank them in the system that we actually submit them in, the Mobius system that the county uses for all their financial management, as well as in the presentations, because the process then of selection, it has to go through the gauntlet of the OMB process first, and sometimes things get taken out, and then ultimately it comes down to the supervisors deciding what they want to spend money on, which things they think are important.
I also concur with the increase in baseline. However, if I'm reading this correctly, that baseline increases $31,000 every year. Is that this last sentence here? Am I reading that right? The
Oh
need
no,
increases.
let me see which one. Oh, the new poll. If we purchase the new poll books, the licensing fee per year is a little bit less.
Right.
So
every year we do postpone it, it's costing us $31,000.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a selling point for the poll books moving forward. So is that, yes, it would cost $800,000 on the whole, but if you're looking at maybe a 6, 7, 8 year cycle for poll book life, you are saving about $200,000-ish, give or take 10 or 20. So that does reduce the real cost of that down to $600K instead of $800K.
So if we postpone this to an FY28 budget and spread it out over 2 fiscal years, we're paying our $800,000 purchase is really closer to 9.
Yeah. If it's 400 for each of those years, then no, we would save $30,000 on the license, so that it would really make it, the real cost would be more like $370.
Well, we're really paying for 2 licenses in the interim, right? As long as we're straddling the fence between the 2, because FY28 you would be operating both systems. You'd have the new poll books, but you'd also, half of the poll books would still be the old.
Oh, no. We would get all the poll books from the vendor. I should have clarified that. They would go ahead and provide us the poll books. They would just be
Split the payment?
willing to accept the payment over 2 fiscal years. And the county may not want to do that. We looked at that option with the current equipment, that the Hart gave us a couple different options for payments over 2 or 3 years at a slightly increased cost, and the county just decided it made sense to go ahead and that sort of like lives in the decisions of the OMB people. You know, they know what the pressures are. That came out of the capital, the CIP, the capital investment. I'm saying that wrong. The capital investment fund, basically. Maybe there was just more room in that, and they wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way because they had other designs for the next. I'm not subject to their priorities on those kind of things, but it gives us options. The county might just say, well, we'd rather just go ahead and, you know, pay for it in fiscal 28 if they add this and pay the whole, cost up front.
But either way, we get all of the equipment in a
Yes.
single.
Yeah. And a lot of the counties that switched to no ink. It's been a lot of them in Virginia over the last couple of years. That was part of how they were able to do it, is get the equipment and delay the payment. We can't really do that. We can't make as an agency sort of a unilateral decision like that, given the large ticket cost that's there. We have to go through that budget process.
And then lastly, on the point of an outreach coordinator position, I don't work at the Office of Election every day. I don't even have an office there. So I couldn't speak to exactly what everybody does, but as the supervisor there, as the boss, I believe what you say about what everybody does. And if you feel that there is a need for another position, I don't know that I'm necessarily in a position to counter that. I have, in my lifetime, been a part of organizations where multiple collateral duties are dumped on me and everybody else. And I know that whenever that happens, not only does my primary job suffer, all the collateral duties suffer as well. Because at some point you just run out of bandwidth. There's only so many hours in a day. So if it were put to a vote, I would support it. However, since I am stepping off the board, I wouldn't want to, as my last act going out the door, sign you and everybody else up one way or the other. So I think I would abstain from that vote, and I would defer it to my replacement.
Yeah. I support an additional outreach, so that we've talked several meetings about voter education. We've talked about the challenge of particularly recruiting more Republican election officers. There are enough outreach kind of things that we could and should be doing that I think it warrants adding somebody with that kind of focus.
I think we peeled some of those back when I started, and that was just because our staffing structure didn't really support it. And I think when I started, I was much more concerned about our fundamental, responsibilities, and that didn't feel like we could spare the resources. And when we realigned our staffing, we sort of siloed people more into their specific areas. But when I started, there were a lot of people that were doing a lot of jobs across different departments, and I didn't think that was efficient or helped people build expertise. It's an argument for it, but not the argument I agree with. I think this is trying to get back to where we were with some of those programs, but also I think that we've seen the value in adding a comms position, which there's not many counties in the state that have one. It's obviously something you're going to see at the larger jurisdictions just because of the needs there. But I think we've seen the value in it, and that it's been responsible for, a lot of the awards that we've won have come out of that. And they've all been things that we had wanted to implement, but couldn't do that without someone, with both the skills like Dahlia has, but also the time and the focus on that. I didn't have time to do some of those things that I would have liked to have done sooner. The I Voted sticker contest was like a day one thing for me, but not a priority when you're in an agency where you're just trying to get back to a baseline of services and competencies. So I think from what we have everyone supporting the operational things, and we have one support, one abstain, and one nay on the outreach position. So I think the priority of those clearly is operational first, and the outreach position second, and we'll put it to the supervisors and the county leadership, and they're ultimately going to make that decision if that works for the board, about what they decide they want to, spend money on or not spend money on, which I'm sure will be changing month by month with property values and all sorts of factors that they have to consider.
Do you have like a complete bullet description of what this job would entail?
Like a whole performance profile, like a.
Yeah, or statement of work, or whatever we call it.
The outreach position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a fully drafted.
description.
Oh, actually, no, that's not true. Yes, we do. I apologize. When you propose adding a full-time position, you have to submit. I'm sorry, it's been a little while. A lot has happened. When you propose these things, you do have to submit a form to the county that indicates what the responsibilities of this position would be. So.
And is it distinct and unique from what Thalia already does?
Yeah, 'cause I think Thalia does a few outreach events a year, but I have very specifically asked her to limit those to really high value ones, and just we're not able to do all of the requests that we get, and we're not doing anything at this point really like initiative based, like, hey, we should be going to all of our senior centers and doing events there. I guess we do maybe one senior center or two.
So the area on aging,
Yeah.
we do like a 30-minute presentation with their locations.
Yeah.
But none of the like assisted living or privately owned senior
Yeah.
homes.
Yeah.
We don't do anything for registration.
Yeah.
And we don't do anything that is sort of like location based that we saw on the charts today.
Yeah.
To push those areas that are sort of lacking in participation. There's those sort of targeted approach. And then you can ask Stephen, I don't touch recruitment for election officers at all. She might give me some copy for a poster to like put up in a county newsletter, and that's it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, and I think in our county too, you have a lot of different groups. You've got senior citizens who struggle with the equipment. You have a lot of people who have linguistic barriers. There's just a lot of different groups in a county as large and diverse as we are, and a lot of different needs. High school students, military members, all these different groups that require sort of special attention, or thinking about how we can make sure that we are, reaching them and getting them the best opportunity to register and vote. So I'm smiling because I went to a convenience store yesterday, and the kid at the counter, I had my jacket on, and he asked me about my job, and he just happened to have moved here from Pennsylvania 2 months ago. So I explained to him how he could register to vote. So we added one more, but we can't all go to convenience stores across the county all year round. We have jobs to do. So,
Well, and so one example that I've heard that this kind of person could do. So for years and years, the League of Women Voters has gone to high schools to do voter registration. But my understanding is that the school system has changed their view of, we only have so many hours a day to do these things. And, in order to do the SOLs, in order to do all the other stuff we don't have time for you to come in to do the presentations on, here's what it means to turn 18 and be an adult, and here's how you register to vote, political participation, all that stuff. Now, I don't know whether the school system would be more receptive to the election office doing this as opposed to the League of Women Voters, but the whole issue about the league not being able to do voter registration at naturalization ceremonies. I think there are enough opportunities for someone to do a meaningful job in lots of those areas. So I think it makes sense to do that.
I think a couple examples around that, Thalia and I've had conversations about the schools, specifically the high schools. What could we do to limit the time that it takes them? But, we've talked about maybe some kind of event, like a day of the year, and they have a competition, and the most, they're competing with each other to see who's signing up, who's registering the most voters for their school, and we can have a winner or something like that. Just different things like that. I think the senior homes, especially too, if we had outreach position, we could do, especially with new equipment coming in, we could have that outreach person go to basically every senior home in the county every couple years, set up a cycle so they could go in and have an hour. Hey, we're going to have you come in. We're going to show you how the equipment works so that, they understand and they're ready to vote. Maybe they have questions about how mail voting works. They've never done that before. Certainly if you're a senior and you're more likely to have, a mobility issue, mail voting is a good option. And it also doesn't preclude you from taking your ballot with you if you decide to go early vote. One of the things we're looking at, I know as a statistic, is we know the percentage of voters that return mail ballots. A lot of the people that get mail ballots also vote early or on election day instead. So if you're talking about participation, once you've signed up to vote by mail ballot, if you're talking about getting almost everybody to vote, like 80 or 90% of the people that are signing up to vote for completing a mail ballot application are voting in elections, and probably less than half of people that don't are voting. So it's a good way to, now it's a self-selecting thing. The people who sign up to get a ballot every election are more likely to have been voting anyway. But anyway, you can do something like that, and Thalia does not have the bandwidth at current to do more than a few events. We also want to make sure it's done in an equitable way. If we do something that is we go to do an event for a community group of some kind that leans conservative, we want to make sure to do one for a group that might lean liberal. If we're going to go do seniors' homes in part of the county, we want to make sure that we can do it in every part of the county. And we had conversations about that, when Thalia started, that we have to make sure that when we're doing these efforts, that it is equitable for all groups, and that it, sort of meets our nonpartisan goal, and not only in practice, but in perception as well. So anyway, we will put it to the supervisors, and they can give us all of it or none of it or some of it or cut it back. We'll kind of see how that process plays out.
When is that?
Well, the county manager will present the proposed budget to the supervisors, I believe, in April. I don't know how far before that official one they get kind of a draft. Then they sort of, have meetings usually in April and May, or in March and April, and they have a meeting where they try to finalize the budget. So it's usually by late April they finalize the budget. So, okay.
All right. Have you heard anything at all from Elect about rolling out the new Veris? Is it going to happen next year?
It's happening next year.
Yeah? All right.
Sure. I mean, that's what they've told us. It seems like there are steps. They have working groups that are working on it. Yeah. Are you on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So Natalia's on the working group. I don't know, Colleen, are you on that as well?
Several people from
Okay.
our jurisdiction.
So we have several people from our office that are on the working group that are they are giving them a first look at it and getting feedback on how it works. So we're hopeful that it will be next year, but it seems like they're close. And I think the plan is next year. But again, you have a new administration coming in, they might come in and go, whoa, we need to make sure it can do this and this before we roll it out. Or they might come in and go, get this out, right away. We don't always know. So it seems like they're getting closer. And we will be very happy, I think, when that process is done. So.
Okay. Public comments. We have.
Just one.
Before we move to public comments.
Sure.
One last thing. So we spent a lot of time today talking about transparency of various flavors. And this meeting itself is actually part of transparency, where it's fully open to the public, what the Office of Election is doing, as well as what the Electoral Board is doing, everything from how we steward the dollars that we're entrusted with, to how we protect and shepherd the vote. And I think it's important that in addition to being transparent in those processes, we're also transparent about our transparency efforts. And to that end, all of the correspondence that I mentioned in my report, those letters will be available through our website, correct? So those will be posted, again, in full interest for questions and correspondence that are questions asked, and to the extent that they're answered, are all on the behalf of the public. It's no secret. And so those should be available online for anybody who is interested in reading them.
Before we go to public comment too, I just want to take a moment to thank Marcus for his service. I've really enjoyed working with him and chatting with him. We tend to meet for 30 to 40 minutes and then up talking for an hour more when he comes by for different things. So I've always enjoyed chatting with him, and I have to give him great compliments as a board member. He's extremely thorough in what he does. I think he communicates well with our office and with stakeholders in the community and party members as well, and always asks good questions. And I know early on, I feel like you were like, "Am I bothering you too much?" And I said, "No, this is good. This is good. This is what a board member should do." And so I wanted to say, thank you to Marcus, and you've done an excellent job in your service. You came in right before a presidential election, and it was just like, here you go to the deep end. And you've done an excellent job, and I have to give compliments to our board all around. I think, you all are responsive to issues that are happening, in the moment, and we have good discussions in these board meetings, and, and it's showing in our results of well-run elections and our award-winning agency. So thank you, Marcus.
I've enjoyed it too. It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, public comments. We have one person who signed up, Denny Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to discuss the authorized representative process, with which I worked on the Republican side this year. I want to say that we think it worked very well, that particularly we appreciated the fact that election officers, chiefs in particular, when issues were raised, and not only were responsive, but they went to source material, they had guidance documents, they showed the basis for the choices that they made. And that kind of good communication is what the process is intended to accomplish. I also want to thank you for having made accommodations at the main office to make it easier to see what was going on. But I wanted to conclude by saying that as you look at new locations for early voting, or as you look at your space needs, the space that's available for authorized representatives to do their job has been extremely tight, not only at the main office, but Gainesville as well. Hard to find a space to observe the process, that you're not impinging on the area where the ballots are being marked, et cetera. And so I'm going to ask you to please take that part of your need. As Marcus pointed out, when we asked for the one space behind the election, the check-in, by law, parties are each entitled to one authorized representative for each poll booth. We didn't come close to having that number of people this year, but in future years we may, and there's just not enough space in the current arrangements. Thank you very much.
Just a quick note on that. That space study the county space study you talked about earlier with our facilities, you'll note one of the notes in there says that because we expressed this need to them when we were talking to them, that not only do we need to have enough room for our operational functions, but there also has to be space for observers at pre-processing, at early voting. So it's a real challenge with our locations, unfortunately, and it's for most of them it's not going to change anytime soon because it would require new facilities, and Prince William County unfortunately just doesn't have a wide group of recreation centers and community centers like you find in other counties in the metropolitan area. So it is a challenge. It is something we've noted to the county, and it's something we'll continue to challenge. But yeah, if we were going to get 3 observers per poll book per party down there, we'd have to stack them. We'd have to get airplane seats or something. I mean, it's a tight space, so we do the best we can.
Yeah, let me also commend you for holding the training for authorized reps. I don't think it was very well attended. I think, the 3 of us and maybe the 5 of us here were, that was the quorum. But I think it's good to provide it because a lot of times the authorized reps show up, at least from my perspective. The DPVA has voter protection and they take online classes, but there are a lot of people who sign up who still, they're not really sure what their job is. And, we offering that training, I think, is another service to transparency and to showing that, they're part of the process. I mean, when I first came on the board, we had almost no authorized reps in any precincts. And then when they started showing up, we had chiefs who didn't want them to be there. And so I think over the years now, the chiefs are, more understanding about the role that the authorized rep plays and, less resistant. And as long as they follow the rules about, where they can be and what they can do, I think they play a valuable part of the process. And so I hope that we'll continue doing that, that training. Maybe it'll be better attended in the future for authorized reps, because the training that the Democratic Party does is pretty limited.
It was good training, and it wasn't in vain, I don't think, even though I believe, if I recall correctly, only one person attended and they couldn't get their mic to work.
Yeah.
On the Zoom meeting. But the training material itself was, after the fact, made available online, so anybody from either party or no party can go take the training on their own. But I would echo what Keith said. I hope that we'll continue to do that, provide that training at least once every year, and hopefully it'll gain traction, because I think it is important, once the polls open, early voting and on election day, that people on both sides of the counter know what they can and can't do under the code. Thanks for doing that.
All right, anyone else that wants to make public comment? Okay, could you identify yourself?
Yes.
And
Yeah, I apologize. It's Carol Noggle, and I wanted to speak to some of the discussion of high school registration and senior centers, not senators. We have, for years, been going to both. And we have some centers that contact us and that want us to come back every year. The school situation changed a great deal when there was a change in the requirement that the schools were offering information on narcotics and drugs. And so they had to allot time for all the seniors to have a speaker come on drugs. And that usurped our time that we had normally been there. So we're gradually working back one by one to the high schools to do registration. Oftentimes it's more with teachers that we've worked with before, and they said, please come and do voter registration. So the league's ready and willing to go. It's just the system has changed some. But I don't know if you've ever seen the list of senior centers facilities in the county. It must be over 100, right? So we try to keep in touch with those that know that we're willing to come, and certainly with the high school teachers.
thank you. Anyone else? If not, we will close public comment. We have a couple of items to discuss in closed session. So let me again thank Marcus for all of his work Thank you all for being here, and hope you have a great holiday season, and we will see you in January, or maybe before with the special election. We may be back here earlier than we thought.
Yeah, yeah. Just do this, Keith. Just go, happy holidays from the Office of Elections, and then Thalia will add it in there.
All right. So, do we have a motion?
I move that the Electoral Board go into closed session pursuant to Virginia State Code Section 2.2-3711-Alpha 7, for consultation and briefings related to actual or probable litigation. Referrals to the Commonwealth Attorney.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you all very much.